all right?
Before we go any further, if you could do me a favor, please smash that like button, show our guests your appreciation. It helps the video out, it helps the channel out. And today it's a huge honor for me to have Tarv. He's a brother. He's actually a very successful brother, global director of AI for Mars, which is a £1 billion company, huge company to work for, and to get to his position, a huge achievement. But he's done a lot of other things, which we're going to find out more about. So Tarv, if you don't mind, if you give us a quick introduction, a little bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, Harbir, firstly, thank you so much for having me. It's a huge honor to actually be here on your channel today, and a big hello going out to all of your all your subscribers and everybody watching this. Thanks for turning out and watching this. So my name's Tarv. I'm currently, as Harbir mentioned, I lead AI for Mars Inc., which is a 100-year-old family business. That's a private family-owned $40 billion business. That's in 80 countries. Been there for about 12 years. Before that, or kind of while I started there, I was also dabbling in music a little bit as well. Been a radio presenter. And obviously I've been on my own journey into Sikhi as well.
Amazing. So with Mars, I think 12 years, for you, it probably seems like a long time, but for somebody like myself, knowing from where you started out to where you are now, it seems like an incredible journey. And I know there's a lot of young people who will probably think, oh, well, I'm Gearstadi, or I'm brown, or I'm not from, I'm not the typical kind of exec face, that I'm not going to be able to make it in a big company. So can you kind of tell us where you started out, what your journey was like in Mars?
Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, I was a skinhead when I joined Mars on the 14th of September in 2009. And my role then was actually, I used to be the guy that used to go and sell chocolate into shops. And it was great because I used to go around, and then, once a month, you have to go and visit 7-8 shops. And I grew up in shops, right? My dad had a shop. And I used to remember the rep coming into the shop when I was growing up as well, and sweating the freebies. And so that's the job that I did. And I remember I used to go into the shops, and once a month, my manager used to come around with me. And my manager was like, hey, you got to sell this deal, you got to sell that deal. And I just used to go in and speak in Punjabi to the retailers and go, uncle, me taraqi ho jayegi, might help me out a little bit if you buy a deal today. He's like, but I'll buy 2 deals today if it helps you get further in your career. So I did that role for a few years. It was a bunch of fun, just having fun. I mean, there at that time, the biggest thing is RBI, it's time, right? Like you can only concentrate on certain things, because at that time, there's only so many hours in a day. And I was happy doing that job. I was happy doing that role because I was doing other things at the time. And then for different reasons, I decided to all of a sudden start, actually growing my hair, wearing a turban. And that was quite difficult, to be fair, for myself and for Mars, if I'm completely honest. And there was a lot of ignorance when that happened. And there was a lot of education needed. And I think it was actually, there wasn't a lot of people that worked at Mars that were, wearing at the start at the time. And for people that, I think it was difficult. I think it would have been a little bit more easy if I'd started and they'd seen me for the first time like that. But because some of these people saw me over the course of the weekend, kind of go from like coming in skinhead and then I'm starting to wear a turban. And let me just be completely honest with you. This was at a time where, in some parts racism was rife. I mean, it still, probably is in today, but it was like, but I always give people the benefit of the doubt, and I have to put it down to ignorance. So I had people actually say to me, well, you got a rag on your head for, that doesn't look good, man. You need to sort yourself out and stuff. And, but you just have to be thick skinned. And what actually happened at that stage was I actually helped educate some of these people by creating a bit of an understanding about different cultures and different backgrounds, whatever religion that may be. Because these people were leading, let's take a step back, they're leading the independent channel. So their teams were calling on shops that are actually not owned by one, background today. It's a multicultural, landscape out there of people from very different backgrounds. So they need to be educated about different backgrounds, the way people look, the way people are, and the reasons for doing that. So that's what happened. I I then obviously had to go through that. But then since then, it's been awesome, to kind of, it makes me proud to be, a Sikh that, wears the star and is able to go and try and, like around the world and do different things and do different roles.
Yeah, it's huge because I know you personally. So I remember, I think it was in the States somewhere where you did a speech and it was in front of all these like top dogs, and you and like Sikhi Sarup doing a speech to these guys. And it's from an outsider, like from my perspective, it's amazing to see that, to see our community in these high positions and representing on an international stage, because you don't stay in the UK, right? You're, every time I speak to you in a different country.
Yeah, not so much lately because of COVID. So I've had the absolute pleasure of being able to be at home for just over a year and actually be with my family, because, before that, I wasn't for a long period of time home very often. And I wouldn't say it's a high position. I think it's, with God's grace and, progress that, I've been humbled to be able to progress at Mars and be supported by some really good mentors as well. And, but I believe anybody can do anything, right? That's the whole point. You just got to have the belief in it. And, and the thing is, to your point about that presentation, that was to our top CFOs of the business and some of the Mars family. And, as I mentioned, the business makes a lot every single year without even thinking. I think they're the second richest family in the US. And they want something from us as well, right? These guys, unfortunately, haven't had the pleasure of growing up in multicultural societies. So don't feel intimidated by yourself about going into a situation like that. They want to learn, as well. And if they are, unfortunately, ignorant, because they're intentionally like that, then you just help them on that journey, right? It's fun.
Yeah, I think you're a great spokesperson, because I've had interactions where people will speak to me and they'll speak to me in slow English because they don't think I understand English. So they'll say, "Hello, you sit here." And I think I was born here. I can speak English perfectly fine. Well, maybe not that well, but reasonably enough to get around. And you're very competent. I know we've had meetings, we've had long talks and stuff, and you're very on the ball, you're very sharp, you're very competent at your job. So, it's great to have. I think being Sikhi Swarup is one thing. You've got the challenges of being from a ethnic minority, potentially, but then you have to be competent at your job, right? Regardless of whether you're white, black, orange, unless you're good at your job, you're not going to get a promotion. You're not going to get from A to B like you have done. So that's credit to you. Can you tell us about the journey? Because going from shop to shop to where you are now seems like a completely different.
It is, but if I can, just want to share something, because you made me actually remember something, and this was really important. Growing up, so I was born in the Midlands. When I was 12, my parents moved me to Southwest Scotland, a little village where they didn't even teach RE at the school there. I had to get a bus 8 miles into the school. There was no ethnic minorities at all, zero. And I remember I hated it. I was like, "Mom, Dad, what are you doing?" Right? And I left all my friends behind. I'm 12 years old. Think about it. I just moved into secondary school. And I remember the first day going into school, and I followed all the kids into the main foyer, as opposed to going round to the reception. And Harbir, I walked in, and about 400 or 500 kids just went silent. I mean, that there was the hustle bustle of kids in the morning, and it was just silent. And I just remember feeling like I'm getting looked at by a lot of people, right? And I walked up to this one person, and I don't even remember who that person was. And I was like, "Hey, where's the office?" And they pointed, and I put my head down and I walked there. And I got taken about an hour later to my classroom, and I met my friends, and Terry Shields, who actually became a good friend of mine at the time, turned around and was the first person that ever spoke to me, and he went, "What's your name?" And I was like taken back. I'm a 12-year-old kid, and I'm like, "My name's Tarvinder." what's your name? And everybody burst out laughing, right? And then, it took them 3 years to bring RE into the curriculum to start teaching religious education. But now in hindsight, I'm so pleased that my parents had the foresight to take me out of where I was born, to take me to a place where there was just no multicultural people, they didn't understand, right? Because actually I had to deal with a lot of ignorance. I say ignorance intentionally and not racism, because it helps you become very thick-skinned. And it also helps you, to your point, to be very confident in any situation at all. So back to your question, that journey at Mars. So I was selling chocolate from out of cars. I was always into gadgets, always into tech. My big brother got me into that, Commodore 64s and the Spectrums back in the day, and always into tech. And I started doing things, to become more efficient in the job, and other people wanted to learn. So I landed myself a job in the UK market, helping those in the field become more efficient. I was the first person to give everybody in the UK an iPhone from their Nokia. So I've got a lot of friends, if you can imagine, taking a Nokia away from you and giving you an iPhone. You're my best friend for life, right? So basically, what happened was there was this collaboration platform that I was rolling out, and I got asked to actually go to Belgium to support the top 100 leaders there, to be able to not travel, so 9 sites, but to actually do what we've been doing over the last year, to connect virtually and to actually send questions into this collaboration platform. So that happened, and it was successful. Our CEO, Grant Reed, was actually there, surprise Q&A, turns up. He's Scottish, by the way, and he obviously lives in the US. And after it, he said to, Joel Morale, who was the European president at the time, he said, hey, I want to meet the guys that have made this possible, because we've saved hundreds of thousands. Think about it, top 100, not traveling, no hotels, all that stuff. So he comes into a room and he meets 2 guys that are working on the Polycom, which is the Zoom equivalent of back then. And he comes over to me and he meets me because I've done the whole collaboration piece. So we had we had a conversation for a couple of minutes, and told him that I was brought up in Scotland. And then I went, hey, Grant. And he said, yeah. And I said, can I take a selfie with you? And he looked at me, he's like, selfie? Why? And I said, because I'm trying to drive change at Mars, and I'm driving this change through this new way of people collaborating, which is Yammer equivalent today for anybody that's in a corporate world. None of this existed then. People were just about must be doing email back then, right? This is like 2013. And I said, my hypothesis is that if I take a selfie with you and put it as my profile picture on this platform, that the adoption will drive through the roof, because everybody at Mars will want to see the guy with the turban who's taking a selfie with the CEO. So he took this picture with me, and I put it on, and that got me a lot of attention. And then I landed probably about 6 months later, I landed a role from one market to a global strategy role, very, very junior, obviously with a lot of people in that. Did that for a few years, which was awesome. And then I got asked to go and drive the transformation of our finance function for a couple of years, where I did that talk that you just referred to about a few minutes back. And then after that, it was quite funny. We had a new chief digital officer who's also Asian, Sandeep Dadlani, very, one of Forbes' top men. He basically saw me at an event in Miami. And at the end of this event in Miami, because obviously my background to DJing and stuff, I got a little bit like there was a DJ there. I started just messing about on his decks. And I actually got the presidents of our business dancing to Bhangra music on a boat in Miami. And this guy comes up to me and he's like, you need to come work in my team. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you need to come work in my team. And I was like, why? And he's like, if you can get the presidents of this business to dance to Bhangra music on a boat, you can get them to do anything. So it took about a year, because I was obviously still driving the finance transformation. And then I joined Digital Technologies, led different strategic initiatives, did some really cool stuff there. And then they offered me the role that I'm doing right now, which is to lead.
Amazing.
Really cool.
So I want to try and glean transferable skills and the overarching virtues and qualities that you have. that other people can apply? Because I know in a conversation once I was talking to you about something and you were like, oh yeah, do you know this person's kids' names? Do you know this person's birthday? And like, you should
top man. He basically saw me at an event in Miami. And at the end of this event in Miami, because obviously my background to DJing and stuff, I got a little bit like kind of, there was a DJ there. I started just messing with that on his decks. And I actually got the presidents of our business dancing to Bhangra music on a boat in Miami. And this guy comes up to me and he's like, you need to come work in my team. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you need to come work in my team. And I was like, why? And he's like, if you can get the presidents of this business to dance to Bhangra music on a boat, you can get them to do anything. So it took about a year because I was obviously still driving the finance transformation. And then I joined digital technologies, led different strategic initiatives, did some really cool stuff there. And then they offered me the role that I'm doing right now, which is to lead.
Amazing.
Really cool.
So I want to try and glean transferable skills and the overarching virtues and qualities that you have that other people can apply. Because I know in a conversation once I was talking to you about something and you were like, oh yeah, do you know this person's kids' names? Do you know this person's birthday? And like, you should take an interest in a person, right? If you're going to have a relationship with them. And so I think there's those kind of things, they're probably just intuitive to you and just part of your character, but for an outsider, they're quite exceptional and they make a person stand out. So can you shed some light on some of those kind of characteristics that you think may have helped in terms of build networks and relationships and that type of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Helps me in the past and it'll help me in the future. And it's empathy. You've got to empathize with everything you do, right? And you've got to be able to make every single person that you talk to feel like they're the most important person in the world. And like, Harbir, how hard is it to remember somebody's birthday or, child's name or who they are, where they're from? And it's not difficult. It doesn't cost anything. And actually, if you remember that, you touch a place with that person that a transactional business meeting that has some functional objectives can't. You can't. It doesn't even compare. So be genuine is number one. Be empathetic is number two. And be honest is number three. I think those are three really transferable skills.
As a concrete example, I remember somebody was coming down, you told me about it, and you set up, they were a fan of, was it a football team or something? And you set up like this whole thing for them. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so it was our CFO, Klaus, the CFO of the whole business. And my boss at the time was like, hey, we've got the CFO to come and spend a day with us. He's flying over from the US and he's going to spend a day with us. He wants to see, it was that finance role that I spoke about. We want to show him the work we've been doing. And I was like, okay. And he's like, so what do you expect? I remember we were in the back of a black cab in London and he's having this conversation with me. I was like, well, so what are the team saying so far? He's like, well, we're thinking about doing like 15-minute presentations and like with a Q&A for 5 minutes. I was like, that's just going to feel like the head teacher's coming around to see everybody's work, and you're going to stand there like, like with your best suit on, waiting for your head teacher to come around, big smile. I was like, he's not going to remember that. Like, you got to give him something that he remembers. And sometimes you have to over-index and actually, invest in the situation. So what we did was we were actually in Munich. We did it in Munich, and his favorite football team was Tottenham. And what we actually did was, he had no idea we were doing this. We created a simulation which made him the CFO of Tottenham for the day. So I met him at the airport, and he's just thinking he's coming into a random meeting, like to kind of meet. I met him at the airport and kind of shook his hand and said, "Hey, it's not what you think. You're here for a simulation where you're going to actually play the role of the CFO of Tottenham Football Club. And you have to make different decisions, and we're going to show you different capabilities of what we've been doing at Mars for the last year with my team. To help you understand that, though, you're going to have to make different choices and decisions to save your club or for your club to go bust, right?" So he was like, what? And I had somebody actually with me filming it, and I was like, this is our correspondent from Sky Sports, because I wanted to make a montage because you wanted to obviously, promote what you did at the end as well. So yeah, we had this amazing day. He learned about so many different things. He never forgot it. He loved Chuck Norris, so we called him Chuck Norris for the day as well. And we gave him a trophy at the end of the day to put on his desk, and he sits on his desk every single day when he comes to his desk. He sees this trophy of him awarded to Chuck Norris, and he remembers that day, right?
That's amazing. That's such a great story. You've done so much. You mentioned Munich, and you've traveled so much. Like you mentioned Miami, Munich, other places in the States. I know you've been to the other, like India and those sides as well. So what's that like traveling? I know because of COVID, you haven't been traveling as much, but prior to that, what's that like? Because that's probably quite a unique position as well. Not everyone travels as much within their roles and to those kind of places.
Yeah, it's awesome, and obviously not so awesome depending on what you're doing and where you're going and who's with you, right? So I've had the fortunate, we're a family business. I've been fortunate enough to be able to take my family with me sometimes as well, which is awesome. You know, Dubai, Miami, I was able to actually go work and actually have my family there with me. And other times I've not been able to, so I've had to go to Australia, which like literally took a whole day to get there. And I was literally there for a week, coming back for a day, and then going to Canada. And I remember to this day, finishing my day, it's like that's a whole day's difference, right? The difference is just ridiculous. So I used to like come back to my hotel room and just like fall asleep on the bed, like sitting up trying to work. It was just so tiring. So, and I actually came back, and the day that I was back that I wanted to spend with family, I actually spent sleeping, right? Because it was just exhausting. So it's great from the point of view of tick, done it. You know, I'd like to, I think now having lived COVID, I need to travel again soon, but maybe not as often. Would be great, you know, literally not, because I remember that whole year, 2019, I was traveling, and then I kind of had everybody, a couple of things. One, I had to go to India. I told my parents that I was going to be in the US, and my parents were in India at the time. So I actually flew from Bangalore to Amritsar, and this was the day before Diwali, and I went to the hotel where I knew they were, and I knocked on the door. My parents, I literally opened their eyes. They're like, well, actually, I had the manager do it. They're like, oh, you got a message from London. They opened the door, what message from London? They saw me standing there, right? I was burst into tears, which was awesome. Took them for some food. My parents like, don't go restaurants, right? So actually, they were proper proud that I took them for some food.
Yeah.
Then the flip was that I said to my family, look, when I come back, we'll go on holiday, and I'll take you on holiday, and that's it. I'm not traveling anywhere. And then I come back, and literally one day later, I got told I've got to fly out to New York for my birthday, right? So I actually was on my own on my birthday in New York, literally because of work. So it has its
ups and pros and cons. I guess if you're not married and you don't have kids, and you're kind of just, you've got just your whole life is focused around work, I guess it's probably a bit easier to manage. It reminds me of the military a bit, because you're deployed and you don't really have a say in it. So you got to do what you got to do. With traveling, I've got a friend who watches these podcasts, Manny. He's got his own business as well, and I find people who travel, they're different. I feel like they're a bit more open-minded. They're a bit more liberal, and they're better at communicating with different kinds of groups of people. Have you found that traveling has opened your eyes to different things or changed you in any way?
So firstly, hey Manny, and secondly, I think, it's a couple of things. One, it's around traveling, but two, it's about experiencing when you're traveling, because you can all go travel for a week's holiday, sit in a resort, enjoying, get a nice tan and come back and not experience. So it's about traveling and experience, but it's also about living. So I think being born in the Midlands, growing up in Scotland, even though it's literally part of the United Kingdom, had a massive impact on the way I am. But similarly, being able to experience different cultures and countries through work has also been massively insightful. And one example, I remember going to Mexico and went into the Walmart in Mexico and realized that actually we have to actually get people to go into Walmarts every single day and protect our space on shelf, right? Whereas here, you and I know in the UK, in Tesco and Sainsbury's, they employ people to stock shelves, and nobody would ever think about another brand coming and just taking a space to it on a shelf. So one example of two very, very different things. But, you know, Mars have, and many big companies, as you develop somebody, they really want you to go and experience different cultures. And, you know, there was a lot of conversation about us maybe moving to a different country and experiencing a different culture. Pre-COVID, I think that's dialed down a little bit now. It probably will dial up again at some point. Maybe something that we will do at some point as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. They actually, Manny, his dad moved to the States for a bit. They were close to Chicago and stuff. And it was a good experience, and I think for them as well, similar to yourself, different part of the world, kind of opened their eyes a bit to things. And reading books on bringing up children, they say if you take your child to Africa, India, they see like poverty, they see different ways of life. It opens their eyes as well, potentially helps them grow as a person as well. So that's an interesting insight, but it makes sense. You got to experience it as well as visiting it. You're obviously a high performer. You wouldn't be in the role you are unless you had a good output and you were able to consistently produce results at a high level. What is it? Any tips or tricks that you can? Because I might do work and then I'm like, need to rest for the rest of the day or something, right? So how do you consistently for 12 years be a high performer without like drugs?
Or drugs, right? I'm joking. Basically, so somebody said something to me once that was really interesting, and it was around the 4 quadrants of life. Yeah, and those 4 quadrants of life are, better remember them now, right? You know, your family, you individually, your community, and the 4th one was was it work? There's a 4th one. Anyway, I should have practiced this before I said it, right? But the point is, you can only ever give, you know, for health, and, you know, we've got dealing with a lot of, you know, mental health and everything that we're going through right now. You need to actually stay a little bit in each one of these 4 quadrants. But actually, over the times in your life, you'll dial one up and you'll dial the other one down. So don't be mistaken. Just because I over-index in my day job, something else suffers, right? You know? So I want to be really transparent then. It's about the choices you make for what you want to do. And the other thing is, you know, just then double clicking into your question around how do you consistently perform to a high level. There's meeting expectations, there's exceeding expectations, and there's actually being outstanding. Contract with your leadership what those look like for you in the year ahead. If you've actually got clarity on what meeting expectations, exceeding expectations, and being outstanding looks like, then there's no question on where you landed at the end of the year, right? Whether that's revenue growth, whether that's unlocking new capabilities, whether that's saving the business money, whatever that may be. Make sure you have that dialogue with your leadership so that it doesn't become because otherwise, you know, you get to the end of the year, you're going, I smashed it. And then your boss turns around and said, well, you haven't really. And then look at your peers as well. Look at what they're doing, where they're at, and are they thinking differently, or are they just checking boxes? So you can be really smart about it without actually having to kill yourself.
And individually, do you do that? Because I'm thinking of most people aren't going to be working for, you know, billion-pound companies that have those systems in place. As an individual like myself, kind of a solopreneur, do you set individual goals for yourself over the course of a year or 6 months, or if so, how do you structure that?
Yeah, and any big organization has an OGSM, right? Which is your goals, your strategies, and your measures. Anybody can have that. You can apply that to anything. You know, even like in parenting, you can have goals, strategies, and measures of what you want to achieve. You can have that in any form of life. So even, you know, to anybody that's not typically working for a big company and is self-employed, or you're all going to have objectives, right? There's a reason if you actually really dive down yourself into why you're doing what you're doing, we all have a reason. Obviously, we get out of bed in the morning because we love what we do, but there's going to be a reason of why we're doing what we're doing, right?
Yeah. So I guess it's about finding your why and then working from there. Or are there any books or resources that you recommend? Because I think self-help is a massive growth area, and people like to read books on those types of things. And Stephen Covey's done one which has a 4-quadrant system but uses it for different things. It's more about time management, his model. Is there anything that you've read or come across that people could look to try and look at their strategy that they need to have for their life and their goals and the measures?
So love reading books. I really appreciate you asking that question. Simon Sinek, you mentioned, starting with The Why as well, is a really, really famous author. His last book is called The Infinite Game. So I'd recommend everybody read The Infinite Game. It's one that I've given my team to read. And the concept is that you either have a finite mindset or an infinite mindset. Now, a finite mindset is like a game of football, where there's 2 teams, there's a set amount of time, and there'll be a result at the end of that time. One person will win, or it'll be a draw. There's a result. There's a winner and there's a loser, typically, unless it's a league game and then there's a draw, but you know what I mean. In an infinite mindset, the rules can constantly change, things can evolve, and it's about how you are able to adapt and actually deal with that change. And Harbir, a lot of it's related to Sikhi, you know, like I don't say this often to people, but everything I do in my daily life links to Sikhi. You know, in Sikhi, you're not meant to be up there and then down there. You're meant to be, you know, kind of on that constant line. If you think about some of the things I've said about those 4 quadrants, if you think about obviously the different areas that we have in Sikhi as well, about where you're meant to play, and you know, our values of, you know, Kirat Guruvan Kishoko Nam Japo. It's like there's a lot of similarities on what I do in my professional life versus what, you know, is in Sikhi as well.
That makes sense, and I want to touch on that. But before we get to that, I remember we had a meeting once and you did this exercise. I think it was like the 5 whys, and you kept asking me, but why, but why, but why? I was getting a headache at the end of it. I had to go take a break. But can you explain that? Because I was having a conversation with somebody, again, they were in the military, and we were talking about this on their podcast, actually. They got a shout out military mindset podcast. And I was talking about how that exercise is important, because superficially we might say we want to do this because, but then that day you really made me think, well, usually there's a deeper reason, right? It's not usually you don't just want to clean up the house for the sake of cleaning up the house. There's probably a deeper reason behind that. And so can you elaborate on that, please? Yeah.
So a big thing today is user centricity. So whatever you want, anybody out there right now, whether you're working or you're creating a new business, it's all around creating value creation. The value creation is the gap between the willingness for someone to pay for something, how much someone's willing to, you know, pay for a service, and how much it costs to make, or that's resource. So the resource costs, willingness to pay, this piece in the middle is called value creation. And getting the biggest value creation all depends on how you approach something from a user-centric point of view. So what's going to make your podcast be the one that's watched versus other podcasts? I use that as one terrible example. But the point is, if I asked you that question, like I did that day when I gave you a headache, I'm sorry, you'll have an immediate answer. But your immediate answer is never really the real answer. And it's actually not even an answer, because don't start with an answer. If you start with an answer, you're actually solving and going with a solution. What's the problem that you're trying to solve? So if I said to you, hey, Harbir, what's the problem that you're trying to solve in doing this podcast? You'll have an answer. But then if I say to you, but why is that a problem? Then you'll think about it and then you'll come up with another answer. But if I then say to you, but why is that a problem? It's called the 5 why exercise, and it's like peeling the onion back. Essentially, what you'll eventually get to is a much different problem to the one you started with. And that's the problem you want to solve, right? Because if you can solve that problem, you're solving way more than just the first thing you said, which was your initial problem.
I think I need to have a meeting with you regarding the podcast. We need to do that. But let's talk about your journey into Sikhi, because as you mentioned at the start of this podcast, you initially had cut hair. So, and being a part of a big company, like I grew up in sports. I used to do Muay Thai. And when I was going to keep my hair, I thought, it's going to hold me back in sports. And even now, if I train at a club, 99% of people won't have long hair, even if it, even for fashion, because you're grappling, your hair gets pulled, and you get knocked about a bit. So that's always kind of been, it's not really done in my profession. And obviously within your field, there's probably not many people in Mars who are, a Kestari and have Sikhi Sarup. So mentally, there's potentially loads of reasons for you not to do it. So you actually doing it, you must have a why for that. So can you talk us through your journey and what that's been like and why?
Yeah, and I'm still very much and at the start of that journey. I just want to call that out as well, right, to anybody else that's watching. So lots that I've got to do, and hopefully will do, over time. And also as well, you may fall off the horse, but it's about, being able to just get back on the horse as well. There's other things that I would turn around and say, because, we've just been brought up a certain way as humans. We're just tuned a certain way to think about certain things. What are people going to think? What are people going to say? What they, what's their perception of me, right? That's just, it's natural, but it's all fickle. If you think about it, who cares what anybody thinks or what anybody says? And actually, so to answer your question, I mean, my parents are Amritdhari, and as you know, people used to see me and then know me for a long time. I used to live, obviously, I stayed in Scotland. I was up there even after my parents came back to the Midlands. And then over time, some friends would maybe meet my parents and they'd be like looking at my parents who are Amritdhari and they'd be like, that's your parents? And I was like, yeah. Nah, that's not your parents. That's my parents. And so there was this whole perception of people. I don't know what they expected my parents to look like, but it definitely weren't what my parents looked like. And then after like 2013, my one of my grandparents passed away. And it just got me thinking about, and it was funny because I used to kind of like think a lot of my uncles who have gone through their life and are a lot older have now obviously turned into, keeping their case and stuff like that. And I thought, well, I don't want to do this later on. If I'm going to do it, I want to understand it a little bit more now. I started just kind of learning, very, very basically. So, I just started learning a bit more about Sikhi, and it agreed with what I wanted to do. And the biggest thing was actually, it's very easy for me to suddenly go and, cut my hair off or shave my beard or start eating meat or whatever I mean, that I may not do anymore. But actually it's about that. It's also about, you mentioned the military at this, during the call. It's also been able to actually say, well, no, this is a choice that I've made for myself. And it doesn't matter. I might have a day tomorrow where I meet somebody that gives me a comment about the way I look, or about the fact that I wear a star, or about the fact that I don't eat meat or whatever. But I can't let that, it's just got to kind of bounce off you like water off a duck's back, because that's their opinion. And they're entitled to their opinion, by the way, that's fine. But you just got to make sure that somebody else's opinion or words or point of view doesn't affect you in what you've set out to do.
And how do you get to that point? Because I was having a conversation with one of my very good mates yesterday and his wife, and we were talking about kids. And there's obviously it's a hot topic, and lots of people have different views on how you should bring up your kids and that type of thing. But my point is that she was saying that my puppy was saying how if the kid isn't practicing, if the kid's not reading his prayers and doesn't have any connection with his faith, then what does the outwardly appearance matter? Because then it's kind of like you're forcing them to look a certain way, but they have no grounding, or they have no reason to look that way, apart from the fact that they're going to get shitted from their parents if they cut their hair. So why do you do that difficult path when you could just follow the easier path?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So firstly, I had case when I was young. My parents grew my hair. I had case till about the age of 8. Used to always get into scraps. People used to always pull my hair, and eventually, my parents weren't really happy with it, but I had my hair cut. At the time, my mum was like, don't worry, then you're going to grow it. And I was like, yeah, whatever, and eventually I did it myself. So to answer your question though, again, your Bobby has their opinion and everybody's entitled. So I don't want to say that Bobby's opinion is wrong at all. But it's just, for example, people have said to me, but hey, you need to give your kids protein. They're not eating protein. They're not vegetarian. They're not eating protein, right? They're never going to be strong. And you and I know examples of people that are vegetarian.
Yeah, and I've seen your kids.
Right? Yeah. So I was like, yo, let's just keep that there. But secondly, on, keeping case, or again, say my own example, I'm trying we try and give our kids as much sangat as they can get. Again, that's not written by us. We haven't ever much sangat they're going to have. It's written, for them. A and B, if they want to, eventually not have kids and they want to go in a different direction, that's their choice. But for me, I'd rather have a starting point where they understand about Sikhi and they have sangat and they have kids, to be able to make the decision to not have that, as opposed to not have that starting point, right? So for me, I came full circle, right? And if my kids ever do fall off the horse, they can hopefully come full circle as well.
That's nice. Yeah, just to clarify, she didn't say that. She didn't, because she'll probably listen to this. She didn't say that we cut our kids here. She meant if they're older, they decide they don't want to keep it. But you're like, you're going to get beaten up if you do cut your hair. And then it's that kind of thing where they have this identity which doesn't reflect what they might be feeling on the inside. But you expressed it beautifully. I think one of the things we talked about yesterday was the importance of sangat as well, because if you're, in Gurbani it says, Jo jaisi sangat kare so taisa phal khaye, and like the kind of company you keep, you'll eat that kind of fruit, if that makes sense. So it is really important. And there is that thing they say in Western culture, isn't it? The 5 people that you're closest to, you'll be and there's some evidence on weight loss actually. And they say if you look at the 5 people that you're closest to, you add up their weight and you divide it by 5, that will be your weight, which is really interesting, or around that mark. So you're not going to have 4 triathletes and one like obese dude. It just doesn't really happen that often, which is probably what they mean in the research. But yeah, so it just goes to say in every culture, the importance of sangat and the people you surround yourself with is so important. Music, let's touch on that finally. So you were really big in the music scene, right? I've seen your stuff on Facebook and stuff. So again, going from that to like the transition into Sikhi, have you had any issues with that?
So no, firstly, I was fortunate in music to have success, both from production, first DJing, then production, and even radio. Right? I used to present radio for some of the big Asian radio stations up and down in Scotland and down here in London. And I really enjoyed it, and I don't do that anymore for different reasons. If you remember the 4-box quadrant I talked about, I had to actually then dial up my time in a different quadrant, which is work and family, to actually, dial down some of that, and taking nothing away from anybody that treats DJing or work. I treat DJing or music production as work, but for me, that I obviously had the day job as well. So yeah, it was great, and the transition then, I think it was quite funny because in some of my last videos, I started wearing the star when I didn't actually wear the star. I actually wore the star when I was still. And people kind of started to say, hey, well, you started to wear the star. And that was when I was playing with the idea of starting to wear the star. And unfortunately, one of my friends sadly passed away in music a few years ago. And I flew up for his funeral to Edinburgh. And a lot of people saw me off for a long time. And I looked very different to what they remembered me as. And they were like, whoa, and they might have thought something. They didn't say it. They didn't voice it. Do I care? I don't really care, if I'm honest with you. And that's all good. So yeah. Nice.
Lastly, slightly personal topic, and you don't have to talk about this, is I know recently you lost your brother, and I have as well. We kind of been through something similar. Is there any advice you can give to somebody who's going through grief, who maybe through the last year or prior to that has lost somebody close to them?
Still figuring it out, so probably not. Yeah. It's like, yeah, it's just. I think it's just realizing that someone isn't going to be there anymore when you take them for granted. I think probably the biggest advice I could give is just don't take people for granted, right? It's like, because that's probably about. I'm not an expert, so I'm happy for people to give me some advice on that side as well.
Yeah, likewise. Is there anything that's helped you through the like COVID period or through prior to that? Anything that's helped you get through?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And one has been exercise and two has been simran. I'm not even going to lie. Obviously, your family having your family, but like I saw this thing, Harbir, about this. I think it was the US Olympic team that have withdrawn from an event.
Okay.
Because of mental health, right?
Wow.
And I'm like, and I saw somebody put a post out. If these Olympians that are just training and just so, physically and mentally fit are going through mental health, what's that say for people like me and you and everybody else watching, right? So you've got to acknowledge the fact that it's a real thing. And I was actually thinking, back in the day when somebody used to, like, mental health was frowned on in our culture, Tikni Hega, the Bamaria, mental, like, come on, guys. Like, now I'm thinking, whoa, and it's a real thing, right? Like having different thoughts of doing or being a certain way, and I'm just hearing all of a sudden that somebody you knew real, fine and well, decided to take their own life. What do you go through to think about that, right? So again, just to come back to your question, because I digress, is for me, exercise, just getting out, taking all that. You're one of the real people that got me out in the first place, running outside on the road and stuff. So I love, running out and just breathing all that in, and really does make a massive difference. And just how your day goes, A, and B, you can get a bit of, if you can't get to the good one, just do a bit of simran, in sanghat, because you can do it at home on your own, which is also awesome. But if you can just get a bit of sanghat once a week, it's good. That's the two things that I think have really helped me.
Amazing. I think that's really good advice to end on. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I know you booked us in between meetings, and it's your time is very valuable. This is very much appreciated. I think it's going to help a lot of people, especially we haven't really had a podcast guest to talk about the stuff that you've talked about. And it's more, every athlete that I've interviewed, when I ask them how much of their sport is down to the mental aspect of it, they often say, 80, 90, 100%. So how much of your progress in your career do you think is down to the kind of mental aspect of, like, controlling your mindset and working on your mindset and that stuff?
Firstly, by the way, I just want to say we're all busy, so thank you again for having me and putting me into your your schedule and getting me as one of your guests. So I really appreciate that. Secondly, I don't know, I think I haven't got it all figured out, Javier. I just literally try and do what I can do, know what I know, to try and get through the week and do what I got to do, right? And it seems to be working. One thing I will say actually is, if my mental health is in a good place through, whether it be fitness or whether it be just doing a bit of simran in sanghat, my week's just easier. Does that make sense? Right? I think, and someone said this to me, it might have even been you that said this to me once, that you're still having the same things to deal with in a week. It's just how you approach those things, right? So if your mindset's a certain way, you'll approach those things in a different way. If your mindset's in another way, you'll approach those things in a different way. So I think
I will definitely take credit for that.
Definitely, I think it was you.
Lastly, I promise, last question is if there's 17, 18-year-old, coming out of school, wants to figure out what they want to do with their lives and that kind of stuff, any advice you can give to the younger generation?
Yeah, hot topic. And I don't want to use this as a way to try and poach talent, but the world's massively changing. And actually coming out of COVID, companies are realizing that youngsters don't want to go to university anymore. They don't want to rack up a big stack of debt and then actually not have a job at the end of it. So typically back in the day, you used to have apprenticeships in factories and other skills. But actually we've started something now, as have many other companies, called the data and analytics apprenticeship. So actually now we're taking on individuals, and I'm really excited that my team is looking at the talent of the future. So if you haven't got a degree, but you've got an interest in data analytics and AI, you can go, I think it's a company called Multiverse, who are working with Mars, Coca-Cola, Just Eat, Facebook, Google, some of the big companies out there, to get you on a 2-year apprenticeship. So pay, work, learn as you earn, I think is the tag they call it, right? Where you for 2 years, you're 80% on the job, 20% learning. You come out the other side with a qualification and a full-time job. So yeah, so that's what I'd say to anybody who's 18, 19-year-old right now that's watching this.
That's brilliant. And if it's, well, I'll add the description, link in the description box below. Is that for UK only, or is that Canada, America?
So it's a great question. It's a global initiative. I think we're dialing it up specifically in UK right now, but it's global. And just give you one example real quick. Coca-Cola have actually paused their graduate recruitment scheme right now to dial up and invest in this apprenticeship scheme in data analytics. That's how important and intentional companies are being in this space.
That's amazing. It's amazing. Okay, so on that note, let's end there. Thank you so much. Where can people find out more? I know you have lots of initiatives that you've been working on, and the YouTube channel as well. Please plug that, and anywhere else they can get hold of you.
So yeah, my name's Tarv Nijjar, as Harbir has mentioned. Right now, I've actually come full circle to bring everything together. So my music passion, my presenting passion, I'm bringing together for the first time with my day job. So I've just started something off, thanks Harbir, called Plaintalks, which is actually going to be something that we want to do to try and help democratize artificial intelligence, because people are scared and don't understand it. So Plaintalks, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, go and search, we're on everything, and we're releasing an episode every week that takes a concept of artificial intelligence and tries to simplify it to a real life story. And we just did one on the weekend, which really shows what wearing masks, Michael Jackson, and artificial intelligence have in common. So yeah.
Yeah, I heard that one. It's brilliant. Thank you so much for your time.